Well, we'll get right to the introductions. I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their affiliation, and then immediately after that, we can step up and start with the presentations. Okay?
I'm John Magnuson. I'm a Lutheran pastor, director of the Cedar Tree Institute, and a collaborative partner with Carl Lindquist.
Hi, Carl Lindquist, the executive director of the Superior Watershed Partnership in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Julie Kinzelman with the City of Racine Health Department.
Stephanie Smith. I run education programs for the Alliance for the Great Lakes.
Go for
it. Okay, well, I have two mics, so I'm all set. John is sitting here on my left because Dave Ulrich invited us here to talk about some of the collaborative work we've been doing that's been getting some national attention, especially around the Great Lakes. This is our logo. And as you can see, the Upper Peninsula is highlighted. So our name is a little misleading in that we also work in the Lake Michigan and part of the Lake Huron watersheds as well. We're a nonprofit organization that covers the entire Upper Peninsula, 15 counties, and over 100 watersheds, depending on how you break them out. These are some of the areas we work in. In a nutshell, a lot of what we do helps to implement the recommendations in many of the Great Lakes management plans. We were actively involved in developing the management plan for Lake Superior, which was the first. We are a relatively small nonprofit, staff of 6, but we also have a small research vessel, so we do some Great Lakes research and monitoring. There we are, satellite view in winter with lake effect, and you can't see Marquette very well, but it's a pretty powerful image, and with the lack of ice cover, as Rosina talked about earlier, we are noticing changes in the amount of lake effect snow. There we are at night. You'll notice there's fewer lights up where we are, but we have all the same issues that we're addressing up there. And we address things on the watershed basis. Everything we do is addressed in that manner. This is part of the problem. These are the political units of the Upper Peninsula, and to address especially water quality issues, I don't need to explain to you how difficult that can be if you try to do it this way. So what we do is take the watershed approach, and what many people are intimidated by that when they see a map like this, but when you break it out further for the Great Lakes, it starts to make perfect sense, and there you have the shading for each of the Great Lakes in the Upper Peninsula. The green draining to Lake Superior, the blue to Lake Michigan, and the red to Lake Huron. So what we do is we work with local units of government, we work with the public, and we encourage the formation of citizen watershed councils. And we currently have over 20 around the Upper Peninsula, and they are our eyes and ears to address issues throughout the Upper Peninsula. And this has worked very well we've been around for about 15 years. But I'm going to just use Marquette as an example now, even though most of the programs we have are UP-wide. There are the political units in and around Marquette. There are the watersheds in and around Marquette. So you can see, even for a small city like Marquette, there are 4 major watersheds that drain through the city, and they go well beyond the city limits into other townships and other cities. So we've been successful in getting these cities and townships sometimes to have the first joint meeting ever of their planning commissions and so forth, because they have to start looking at these things on a watershed basis. I like this quote. I feel sorry for the panel members. They can't see my wonderful slides. But this quote for you says, "When people work together, it's called teamwork. When counties, townships, and cities work together, it's called a miracle." And we've been able to pull off a few miracles getting them to work together on a watershed basis. So quickly, we do all of the standard things that many watershed groups do, a lot of planning and field projects. But I wanted to talk more about some of the pollution prevention projects that we've been doing. And to start, I used this slide, again, a satellite photo showing a sediment plume. And just for its dramatic effect, the sheer size of that plume is staggering. But I was going to suggest that if anybody, for whatever city you're from, I would suggest that you find your storm drain outlets to whatever Great Lake you're on, and next time there's a downpour, when it starts, run out to that storm drain outlet. Even on Lake Superior, the cleanest of the Great Lakes, and I have done this and you'll see the water come out black, thousands, tens of thousands of cigarette butts, a sheen of oil going out as far as you can see, but within a half hour, there's no trace of it, except for the cigarette butts washing up on the shore. So on a sunny day, it's crystal clear, and very few people are aware of what occurs when there's a downpour, and especially that first flush. But what I'm going to talk more about are the invisible plumes that go out into the Great Lakes, and we're all aware of what that issue is. And here's one example of a successful project we had within the last year. This is our wastewater treatment plant. The effluent comes into the Carp River and then immediately into Lake Superior. Marquette has had some of the highest levels of mercury in their wastewater effluent in the state of Michigan. And it's been attributed to, a lot of it, to dental amalgam. And so we worked with this association of dentists in the greater Marquette area, about 30 dental offices, and we're able to educate them on the issue. They passed the resolution unanimously to install these mercury separators, and in less than 8 months, all 30 offices had installed these separators, and the treatment plant has seen their mercury levels go down dramatically. I just use it as an example of how things can work without having to resort to new ordinances, etc. Without getting into any detail, we do all sorts of the traditional public education, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about something that was not traditional, and that's why John Magnuson is here also. In 2004, the Cedar Tree Institute and the Watershed Partnership worked together to draft the Earthkeeper Covenant, which is basically an environmental agreement, and John can talk more about this, and how we were able to get signatures from 9 different faiths, the bishops and religious leaders from 9 different faiths, to agree to work with us on certain environmental issues. Since then, the number of churches that those signatories represent has grown to almost 150. So suddenly we have one of the most effective ways of getting to the public and getting results. Those are some of the faiths. This slide is old. The number of congregations is growing almost weekly. We also work with the Native American tribes in the Upper Peninsula. And this network of churches represents every community in the Upper Peninsula across 15 counties. So it's incredibly effective for whatever we focus their energy on. The first year in 2005, we focused on household hazardous waste. We had 20 collection sites around the Upper Peninsula. Each community, the collection site was a church, and that is always the way we structure these. But all events are open to the public. We have hundreds of volunteers that help us out, and thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people that turn out. Household hazardous waste in 2005, collections around the UP. This eventually all had to be sorted. This is a disturbing slide to me because of how everything's stacked so haphazardly. But it was eventually sorted and weighed, and we had over 45 tons collected in one day. We collected, actually 3 hours. We have these events from 9 till noon. We collected more in 3 hours than one of the few household hazardous waste facilities in the Upper Peninsula. There aren't many. But one had been in existence for 7 years, and we collected more in 3 hours than they did in 7 years. So we broke some national records with that. EPA used it as their lead story in their Great Lakes Significant Activities Report, and Governor Granholm recognized the effort as well. So last year we focused on e-waste, electronic waste, again, using the churches and the network. Churches all around the Upper Peninsula, communities all around the Upper Peninsula, even Mackinac Island with the horse-drawn carriage. And there we collected over 320 tons of electronics in 3 hours. That equates to about 1.7 tons per minute. Broke all national records for the amount of e-waste collected. And when you consider that the UP is fairly rural, it's pretty impressive. Again, featured with the Significant Activities Report for the Great Lakes. Got a lot of coverage throughout the country, Chicago Trib, and in Canada and even in Europe. These are some of the bishops and other leaders accepting an award from the Lake Superior program. We also got one of the highest Great Lakes awards, the State of the Lake Ecosystem Award in Milwaukee last fall. So this spring, we focused on another emerging issue of pharmaceuticals in our waters. And I just wanted to mention, we usually host these events on or near Earth Day. So, as you all know, this is a very serious emerging issue. I did talk with Mayor Hartwell about using this slide just because it's so fitting. This is from Grand Rapids paper in April, and they have detected pharmaceuticals in trace amounts in the drinking water in Grand Rapids. And obviously, how they get there, people have the misconception that the proper way to dispose of unwanted or outdated medications is to dump them down the drain or dump them down the toilet. They are not captured when they go through the wastewater treatment plant. They end up in the river, eventually the lake, and in some cases it can occur in our drinking water. So, one, this is a national issue as far as raising awareness on how to dispose of these things. And in a nutshell, do not put them down the drain or the toilet. And we hosted a collection event, again, using what we call our Earthkeeper network, this network of churches and all the communities across the Upper Peninsula. This was, again, on Earth Day this year. This was logistically a tough one for us to coordinate because at each collection site we had to have at least one pharmacist and at least one law enforcement person for any controlled substances. But we were able to do it, again, with this incredible network. We have so many people willing to help, and we had usually 2 or 3 pharmacists at each site, and at least 1 law enforcement official, and again, hundreds of other volunteers that are just on hand to help. In a nutshell, in 3 hours, we collected over a ton of medications. Again, breaking, we have not yet heard of another collection that has collected as much. And of that ton of medications, the small percentage is controlled substances. That has been valued at over $500,000 in street value of these different narcotics and different pills. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention, these types of events had a lot of comments from the law community and the court system that they're really glad we hosted this event because of the other social benefits of keeping these medications out of the wrong hands and so forth. So I just wanted to stress that this is a really effective way to get things done. John's going to talk more about how to do it. To get these 9 faiths, we're actually going to be growing to 10 here soon, together is not easy. John can talk more about that. But if you can get them together, to work together, it's incredible, the ability to get the word out and to get people mobilized to address certain issues. I'm almost done here. Just quickly, we've also started addressing some climate change issues. We recently held an energy conservation and alternative energy conference inviting members from these 150 congregations. They're big energy users. As you know, churches are not easy to heat or light, but also our other partners, local units of government, schools, and businesses. And also worked with Rich Vanderveen's here today and Mackinac Wind Power to talk about some alternatives, as well as reducing energy consumption and water consumption. Another interesting thing that has some tie-in with Earth Keepers, and it's another thing we've been working on for a few years now, is promoting sustainable economic development by promoting nature tourism. And it's a program we call Great Waters. We work with Northern Initiatives, an economic development group. But we're promoting the lake trails of the Upper Peninsula. So as this map shows, we have the 3 different trails, one for Lake Superior, one for Lake Michigan, one for Lake Huron. We have over 300 businesses that we're working with to promote the natural assets of the Upper Peninsula. We're also working with these businesses on ways that they can become more green by reducing their energy consumption. And many of these businesses are also connected to their churches, and so there's a lot of overlap with the Earthkeeper program. This is a great quote from E.O. Wilson, a Harvard biologist. Let's recognize that science and religion are the 2 most powerful forces in the world. I'm calling on the religious community to join the scientists and environmentalists to save the creation, to save the world's biodiversity. And I read that for you because you can read it yourself. But I think he hit it right on the head, and I think we're a good example of that in the Upper Peninsula. We're breaking some national records by combining the 2. And lastly, I wanted to talk briefly about education. A number of people talked about it today. But we've always worked with the local schools, a number of schools around the Upper Peninsula, but we are in the planning stages now with the Great Lakes Fisheries Trust and the Wege Foundation out here out of Grand Rapids and others on incorporating Great Lakes education, watershed education in all the schools, K through 12, throughout the Upper Peninsula. And so I think we all recognize that that's where the future of the Great Lakes lies. And it's exciting to think about, especially in the Upper Peninsula where it's sometimes easier to get things done. I don't know why that is. But you can see here, these are most of the schools in the Upper Peninsula, and you start educating on a watershed basis, and that every kid knows it and understands it and how they work and how they affect the Great Lakes. Whether you're on the shore of the Great Lakes or you're 20 miles inland, you're affecting the Great Lakes. And once that becomes standard curriculum, it's exciting to think about where that can lead. Lastly, this is the last slide I will talk about. We make a point of trying to make this as fun as possible, and because we have so many volunteers and so many communities involved, we try to recognize them and have some fun. So this Sunday, if anybody's in Marquette, we are putting on the Concert for Lake Superior. We have the newly formed Boreal Chamber Symphony. We have dance artists who have with artwork pertaining to Lake Superior and the Great Lakes. And it should be a lot of fun, and it's free. So if you're in Marquette, that's on Sunday. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
As a university campus pastor, that's my other part of my work. I often deal with hostile attitudes toward any kind of religion or involvement or belief. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that in terms of this audience, we have mixed experiences. And what might prove helpful, and has proved helpful for me, is a comment that one of my professors of historical theology said to me right before I left seminary in Hyde Park, Chicago. And he quoted it from his father, who was a missionary in Madagascar. He said, "Never forget, no one can hate like a religious person can. But no one can love like one can either." So it's the latter that we're here about, and Carl has referred to, and I'm going to be to the point here and very briefly comment on the religious component, the faith community's component in partnership with the Watershed. We are living in a time that Thomas Berry, a Roman Catholic theologian, calls the Great Turning. And what he means by that is we're living, as most of us are certainly aware now, with a new engagement and awareness of how we relate to the planet that we have come to call home. Barry says there are 3 converging rivers that are making this great turning happen. The first comes from science. I sat in the airport at Thunder Bay 3 years ago with the EPA scientist. We were talking about atmospheric loading. Some of you know that. It's the way that Lake Superior is contaminated through cloud and precipitation, which is a real serious problem when it comes to dioxins. I said, "Well, where is this stuff coming from?" He said, we have a very sophisticated mapping technology. We finally discovered it just last week. And I said, "Where is it? Duluth? Detroit?" He said, "No, it's St. Louis. St. Louis." These wind currents, we're all connected. And the scientific community is helping us to understand that in new ways. The second converging stream is the health crisis facing us now, especially regarding environmental threats. Very few of our citizens of Upper Michigan know that every lake in Michigan has a fish advisory warning. Every lake in Wisconsin has a fish advisory warning now. The 2 fish biologists that I know at the University of Minnesota and Michigan Technological University won't eat any fish. So this is becoming increasingly apparent to folks in our society. Endocrine disruptors, we all know about those. They mask estrogen. We know the menses in women have dropped from average age 11 to 8 in the country. We know this is because of meat contamination and hormones that come into the water system. The third converging river is the recovery of indigenous wisdom. That's what Barry says. And I thought last night it was very appropriate, David, that we had Frank with us, from the Little Traverse Band, and there's a great wealth of power and wisdom that now is being recovered. But Barry's not the only one saying this. Tom Friedman, New York Times columnist, economist, 3 months ago he wrote in Harper's, "The first country that goes green is going to lead the 21st century." I would say the first city that goes green is going to lead the Great Lakes. I picked up the Detroit Free Press today. Huge ad for one of your congressmen, one of our state congressmen, and it reads, "He helped save the bald eagle. Now he's here to stop global warming." There's a change of consciousness that's occurring, and everybody's trying to get on the wagon. Well, let me talk very briefly, 3 points about how the process happened. First of all, you have to have a dream. It has to be a shared dream. This dream came out of in a Jeep, riding in a Jeep on the north shore of Minnesota on a way to a binational Lake Superior meeting in Thunder Bay between Carl and myself. I say shared dream because dreams don't come out of committees. They come out of individuals, but for dreams to find meaning and impact, they have to be shared. This has to do with circles of trust. A second point that is important is there needs to be a change agent. We represent nonprofit organizations, and I want to encourage those who represent municipalities and cities here to understand that there's incredible potential for partnerships. And we were able to do something that cities and municipalities and departments of the government have been unable to do. And thirdly, I want to talk about leverage. Leverage has to do with sensitivity and brokering the dream. We had a Bishop, James Kelsey, who I want to honor today, who was killed in a tragic accident in June on the Sini stretch in the Upper Peninsula. He was our broker to the other religious leaders. And finally, self-interest. The importance of self-interest. I sat with a bishop when this dream was unfolding, and he said to me, "Do you really see any connection between spirituality and the environment?" And I looked at him and I said, kind of sarcastically, because I knew he didn't have any children of his own, at least I assume he didn't. I said, "You know, anybody under 25 years old, this isn't even a question." And he looked at me and he said, "Young people, do you think this is a way we can bring young people back into the church?" I said, "Absolutely." He stood right up in his chair. I still remember it. And he was one of the first signers on that Earthkeeping initiative. Now, I only say that to acknowledge we all have self-interest in this room. And if you want to see something happen, you better figure it out and then move. And that's how things happen. 2 things the churches bring to the government movements and the environmental movement. One is we bring a network, a quiet army, over 300 volunteers. Over 300 volunteers, on the ground people, committed. Are you aware that 90% of volunteers working to clean up Katrina, 90% since the hurricane, have been church faith-based group volunteers? Are you aware of that? It's not the Red Cross. Don't go there. Faith-based volunteers. Hundreds of thousands since Katrina. That's what's lying. That's the potential waiting for you as leaders to tap. And secondly, rituals of hope and meaning. For those of us who are Christians, it's the Eucharist, prayer groups, where we can sustain, be resilient, be flexible, and not have to take the credit. We can give it away because we serve a higher power. A mission that we may not see the end of in our own lifetimes. Well, let me close by saying that in the 1970s, I was a seminary student in South Chicago, working with gangs, Blackstone Rangers. We got anybody from, somebody introduced themselves from Chicago. Is that Elderman still here? Okay, I wanted to honor him. I worked on 76 in Dorchester with the Blackstone Rangers for part of a year as part of my seminary training. And to just be quite frank, those of you who come from urban situations, you know churches are not mostly your friends. They're at your city council meetings, they're raising hell about good housing, health, and protection and legal matters. Well, I want to just end with the invitation here. This is an opportunity where there's a minimal of adversarial energy and a maximum of upside gain. That's what we did. And thank you. Carl, just close it out. Close it out. Makes sense, yeah.
We're going to still have the panel here, but we just wanted to say that if any communities in the Great Lakes wanted more information on how to pull this off, just get in touch with Dave, and we'll work with you.
Yesterday, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative members adopted Resolution 4-2007M calling for common safe indicators, standardized sampling protocols, rapid methods, and identification of effective beach management programs to improve water quality. So today, I'm going to attempt to summarize some recent federal initiatives in the U.S. and Canada, 500 pages in 5 minutes. I'm open. This is a picture of North Beach in Racine taken a couple of days ago. Got to start with a pretty picture. In the U.S., the Great Lakes states have aligned compliance monitoring programs to meet U.S. EPA Beach Act requirements, but there's many differences in how they met compliance within Great Lakes U.S. states, and there's also a lot of difference between U.S. compliance programs and programs in Canada. And as the resolution stated, the EPA has not met requirements to publish new or revised criteria in accordance with the Beach Act. And they were sued. And in response to the court ruling in favor of the National Resource Defense Council, the U.S. EPA convened an experts workshop at the end of March to gather opinions of experts in the field of water quality. There were 43 national and international experts, roughly comprised of about 30% EPA staff and 70% of other people representing state, federal, international agencies, universities, and public health. And they looked at critical research needs, which I know will be disappointing to you because the timeline for completing this, to the EPA at least at this point, is 2012, which I know is longer than what Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative and many other people would like to see. The experts were divided into 7 topic areas, which you see here. Some of the things that you see represented are reflective of Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative ideals, such as our beach standard work group, where we looked at risks from different sources, and they are recommending now that it would be a good idea to do new epidemiological studies at sites where there's mixed human, non-human, or predominantly non-human contamination, because to date all epidemiological studies relating human health risks to water quality have been done solely at sites where human sewage is known to be an influence. Other things like predictive modeling are underway. Earlier this week, the EPA began filming a training video to assist any interested agency in developing a predictive model, a mathematical data collection, which would allow you to anticipate water quality in advance of bacteriological tests. They filmed in Racine, Wisconsin, in Lake County, Illinois, in Cleveland, Ohio, and in Indiana. And that should be targeted to be released in October of 2007 at the Great Lakes Beach Association meeting. Other topics generated more discussion. Unfortunately, it may take longer to bring to market, but many have a common thread, that thread being the identification of contamination sources. If we look at criteria development, even though they have not come to a final decision, there were several benchmarks, 7 common themes that they felt they needed to address when developing new criteria. And also, they looked at approaches currently in use, the EPA 1986 standards, and other criteria that are used throughout the world, such as the World Health Organization model, which uses both bacterial indicator levels and a sanitary inspection category, the European Union approach, which is used similarly in Quebec, where they have established a beach grading system. They also look at the methods development, since that was something that was mentioned in the resolution. They looked at replacing existing methods with more rapid tests. Quantitative PCR is the one that's being looked at most closely because it seems like it will be most likely to be successful in the short term. They looked at replacing existing indicators with ones that are more indicative of human health risk, and that might not be entirely replacing it with the existing indicators, the E. coli or the enterococci, with another bacteria, but in fact might be pairing that with a secondary indicator that's reflective of human health risk. And also the methods development team felt it was important to look at site-specific sources of pollution. If we flip to the Canadian side now, I've had the privilege of being asked to sit on a peer review panel for the Canadian Federal Water Quality Guidelines. They've given me permission at this meeting to speak briefly about what's in the document. It is in draft format only. It's currently under peer review, so it is moving forward, and they will release it for public comment in the near future. Some things remain the same, the E. coli and enterococci as indicators, but they have introduced some new things. They've introduced the concept of a multi-barrier approach to risk management, the use of environmental health and sanitary surveys, and they've also included sections addressing non-traditional sources of contamination. The rationale behind including these items was the fact that they felt there was no new evidence suggesting that the E. coli or enterococci were not protective of public health. But having said that, they do feel that the fecal indicators alone are only reactionary, and there needs to be some more immediate approach to managing recreational waters. That there is a need to identify and control pollution sources, and that the environmental health and safety surveys would be a mechanism to help control that. Because the only true protection of public health comes from the removal of the source of contamination. So let's take a step back to the Great Lakes Regional Collaboration and remind you of some text. In the Coastal Health Chapter, Goal 2 looked at reducing the number of days where we had water quality advisories, and to do this through the use of standardized sanitary surveys. And to achieve this goal, we recommended that the Beach Act be fully funded, and in fact the Beach Act is up for reauthorization, and there were hearings yesterday in Washington, D.C. We also looked at recommended the evaluation and trialing of real-time testing technologies. And in the fall of 2006 and spring of 2007, the EPA has conducted method validation studies for real-time PCR at approximately 12 national laboratories, one of them being Racine, so municipal perspectives are being represented. And they are doing some additional projects at marine sites. So they're moving forward with that. And we also recommended the draft and implementation of standardized sanitary surveys, which I'll cover in just a second. In Goal 3, we addressed indirect sources of contamination and the need to identify them. In order to mitigate or remediate the sources of contamination in your communities, you have to know what those sources are. And our recommended actions were to implement coastal community education and outreach programs, which will be addressed by Stephanie directly following, and also, once again, using sanitary surveys to ID your sources of contamination. Let's see how you are. Without using sanitary surveys, we're not doing too good of a job. From these slides are from Charles Kovach from the EPA, where we, as Great Lakes states, need to report in our number of advisories and the source, which we felt caused the advisory. And we can see from 2003 that 95% of the time we didn't know what the source was. And you can see that CSOs were not identified. Doesn't get much better in 2004. We have 92% unknown. 2005 nationally, we had 80% unknown. But within the Great Lakes, 90% unknown, 7% attributed to stormwater. So in my opinion, beach sanitary surveys are a necessary tool to improve Great Lakes water quality. I also sit on the work group at the request of the Office of Water to help develop the draft sanitary survey tools. I'm happy to say that they are on target with this. Beach standardized sanitary surveys are one of the first actionable items coming out of the Great Lakes Regional Collaboration. And there are several current projects in addition to the recommendation for beach sanitary surveys coming out of this organization. The EPA has funded 9 grant awards totaling over $500,000 to 8 U.S. and 1 Canadian agency, which will draft pilot sanitary surveys at over 60 Great Lakes beaches this summer. The Canadian studies in Huron County, I don't think the mayor of Goderich is here, but there's 3 beaches in Goderich that are involved in that study, and if people want to know the specific sites, I'd be happy to tell them later. What do these projects entail? Beach sanitary surveys are guided data collection, like a paper tool or electronic tool, which will assist you in identifying sources at the beach level and at the watershed level, and also guide you in the collection of data to construct a predictive model in lieu of real-time testing, which is still some time out. So to summarize, beach sanitary surveys as themselves might seem like a small step, but they're better than no step forward at all. They appear to be an integral part of successful beach management programs, and a common theme resurfacing in discussions at both the federal levels in the U.S. and Canada. So what might our new criteria look like? They might follow models such as the WHO model, which incorporates both bacterial standards and results of sanitary surveys. They might use traditional numerical standards such as we use with E. coli. They might have different bacteria, and they will likely include some sort of source identification, such as the beach sanitary surveys call for in the U.S. and the environmental health and safety surveys call for in Canada. So it'll take a more big picture approach, not looking at one E. coli value, which only tells you what water quality is at one point in time, but a more holistic approach to water quality. And here are some links. Remember that these are only discussions or drafts at this point, and the documents are not finalized, so there is an opportunity for input and discussion. Thank you.
No, sorry. When you want to flip? Oh, just pull it up. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Smith. I run education programs for the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and I'm going to wrap it up here with my talk, talking about education in the context of some of the emerging issues that we've been hearing about today and yesterday as well. Je suis tellement contente d'être ici parmi vous, les amis des Grands Lacs. And I am going to do my talk in English, so sorry to the folks who speak French. That was my little brief sentence for you all. I'm just going to say a few words about the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We were founded in 1970. We're a nonprofit organization. We have offices in Chicago, which is where our headquarters are and where I work. We also have an office in Grand Haven, Michigan, and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As I talk today, I'm going to refer a little bit to a handout, which is on your table. So if you want to take that with you when you go, it's a handout that says education at the top of it and has a diagram that you will see in a few minutes in my presentation. As I'm talking about the Alliance, our mission is to work to restore the resource we all know and love, and we use policy, we use education, and we use on-the-ground efforts to do this. The reason that education is so important, well, first let me go back here. Let me tell you about what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about why it's so important. I'm going to talk about an alternate model for education, and I'm going to give a couple of examples in 5 minutes or less. The Great Lakes face really pressing problems. I'm not going to go into this list. But what I do want to mention is that one of our problems is that we don't have enough education out there about these problems. Now, a lack of education is a problem because without it, we can't transform, in the words of one of our speakers from yesterday, we can't transform those who don't get it into those who do get it. Education can help alleviate some of our pressing environmental problems and help us anticipate and prevent future environmental problems. While the system desperately needs restoration, restoration without education can lead to further issues, can lead to complications, and generally unhelpful actions by public who maybe don't understand how they can help. People need to understand how they can be positively involved, because it really is all about stewardship. As Frank Edwagishek said last night, it's about making it a little bit better while we're here. Now, if we look at, over time, some of the models of education, our current system is in fact based on our agrarian model way back. But as we talk about over time how this model has shifted, our problem is that our focus hasn't really been on problem solving and involving people in these issues. Our focus has been on rote skills and those needed for mass production. Eventually it's begun to segue into a more knowledge-based system. And while that's existed in the past for the few, what we need to do is bring this system that's more knowledge-based to the many. Because in order to solve 21st century problems, in combination with our legacy problems, we really need a different product from our education system. We need one that's generative, that uses synthesis and analysis and involves people in real-world solutions. In the past and into the recent present, we have relied, the general public that is, has relied a lot on governmental policy and watchdog groups and studying environmental issues as history. But as we begin to move forward, we need a new model, as I said, and one that will help us produce stewards, problem solvers, visionaries. Because ultimately, when we think about it in our communities, that's what we need in order to be able to address these issues. It's all about people making choices. The approach that I want to put out there to you all, this is part of what's on the diagram on the handout that I mentioned earlier. 3 simple steps. Let's help people get connected. Let's help them understand the nature and the value of our resource. Let's give them information, step 2, let's give them information to understand the ecosystem, including the significance and the source of the problems. And 3, let's give them opportunities to take part in developing and implementing solutions to these problems, to investigate them at a much deeper level than we currently involve them. Now, sorry, we had a little skip there, but I'm going to go, that's the model. And as you can see, these steps all build on each other. Quick story. A few years ago, I took a group of urban students on an overnight field trip. While we were preparing dinner together, one of them said to me, "What's this?" I replied, "It's a cucumber." And she told me she'd never seen one before. As we've become farther and farther from our agrarian past, we've become disconnected from our food sources. Translating this over to the Great Lakes, we can see that many of our communities maintain a very strong sense of the importance of the lakes, but over time we have become disconnected from them as being central to our sense of regional identity. For many communities, we are no longer as intertwined as we once were with the fishery, with the shipping industry. So within our modern communities, we really have to grapple with ways to build knowledge about nature. But it's very important to do this, because if people care about a natural area, then all of a sudden its problems become relevant to them. They become invested in the solutions, and we no longer have to address the question of, so what? Why does this matter? Now, what we need are more opportunities to get connected. And when I talk to people about why the Great Lakes are so great, I will ask people to tell me what they think about what makes them so great, and often I encounter long silences. And that's because we've got people in close proximity to the Great Lakes who rarely get out to the lakes. How do we get them connected? Well, we need field trips, we need family outings, people need time to spend close to the resource, to observe it, to have fun in and around it, and to reflect on their own personal connection to the Great Lakes, to actually build that connection. Now, this is actually a question that I have been asked more than once. I've also been asked about jellyfish. The question, sorry, for my panel is, are there sharks in Lake Michigan? I've also been asked, as I said, about jellyfish and whales. Now, in the years that I've spent working in Great Lakes communities with students and with teachers, I have seen many, many examples of ocean food webs in the schools that I've gone into. I have never seen a Great Lakes food web. I know they're out there, but I've never seen one in any of the schools that I've gone into that's been on display. Now, the ocean is a vital and essential ecosystem to study, but why aren't our students also learning about the Great Lakes? Why aren't they also making Great Lakes food webs? Now, personally, I find the lake sturgeon as charismatically appealing as a shark. So, going to the second step of exploring our concepts and problems, we know there's a lack of understanding out there. We need to give people an opportunity to learn about the ways the ecosystem functions and the problems that it faces. This image is a volunteer holding a microwave that he found during a beach cleanup. Now, of course, that's not something we find during every beach cleanup, but this is an example of a way to get people involved. It's through volunteering, through restoration, through cleanups. And this is a type of program that will help people learn about their ecosystem while helping it. So, a couple other ideas for exploring the ecosystem and its problems. What we really need to be doing here is building enthusiasm about our backyard as an exciting place to learn science, social studies, math, language arts. It is a living laboratory right in our backyard. We need to take advantage of that. And lots of opportunities for adult education classes. And of course, as I mentioned, volunteerism. But as we think about some of the issues that people are so compelled by, they affect them personally, let's get some classes out there for adults in our communities to teach them about beach health, to teach them about the fishery, climate change, some of the things that we've discussed today, because there are so many ways that we can partner scientists with our community to be able to educate more fully about these issues. There's so much excitement in learning about a real place with real issues that can be solved by real people. One further story here is that I asked a group of students about what the source of their power was in their community. The response was, duh, it comes from the outlet in the wall. Well, I expected perhaps that I would hear about the coal-fired power plant nearby, but that's an example of an instance where we are lacking a lot of information. How can we be getting people involved in solving these problems if they don't have the information, if they aren't more connected to their resources? When it comes to developing and implementing solutions, we can get lots of very innovative solutions and ideas from community members who can be out there collecting data, looking at some of these issues on their own in partnership with different programs that exist. I'm going to give you just a quick heads up about this curriculum resource that is called Great Lakes in My World. It's an Alliance educational curriculum. It looks like this in real life. I've got copies if you'd like to see it. It's got 80 activities that educators can use to teach their students about the Great Lakes. It comes with this fabulous set of creature cards. Hopefully it will help our students understand with images here what lives in the Great Lakes. No more questions about sharks, jellyfish, and whales. As I will highlight that resource, there are many other wonderful educational resources that can be brought into our schools that teachers can be using to bring some of these concepts into the classroom. And of course, looking for resources that are based in educational standards is very important in the United States in particular, and resources that are cross-disciplinary as well. Now, just a few quick words about our Adoptive Beach program. I have some flyers at the back table if people are interested in more information, and I would certainly be happy to talk more about it. But this is one of the ways that people can connect, explore, and investigate their local resources. We've partnered, we have partnered with many, many groups around the Great Lakes, and we have about 5,000 volunteers in this program. They do work on 4 out of the 5 Great Lakes. They collect data on litter, on water quality issues, and on general beach conditions. And the program is organized through our office. People enter that data that they collect into an online database, and then the hope is that they use that data to create some kind of positive change at their local beach, and we help them to do this. These folks collected over 150,000 cigarette butts last year alone, and over 7,000 balloons. I'm not going to go into the issues related to those particular items, but suffice it to say that they are not so great to have out there along our Great Lakes shoreline. Now, I want to mention one quick event. So Saturday, September 15th, coming up, there's an international event all around the world, and of course in the Great Lakes, International Coastal Cleanup, an opportunity to get people of all ages involved in helping to take action for the Great Lakes shoreline. And I'm happy to provide more information about that event as well. Finally, I want to just mention the idea of stewardship-based learning called service learning that is gaining national importance. Just like we are seeing raised awareness about global climate change, we are also beginning to see people talking more and more about integrating stewardship into the curriculum, into the classroom. It's important to build on these national issues as they arise. So as we see people talking more about it, it makes sense for us to try to integrate with this. Service learning involves stewardship in the classroom. And one of the things that we've seen in communities around the Great Lakes is that people are starting to require it for graduation. For example, Chicago Public Schools ask students to have 40 hours of service learning before they graduate. Now, one of the things that we're working on with this program is aligning it to more official efforts, and Julie mentioned the sanitary survey, and that's the kind of direction we're heading with our volunteers, is so that they can be able to collect the data that's actually recognized on forms that are recognized at the national level. Very important to involve real people with real problems and real solutions. Finally, last slide. I cannot say enough about how we need to build enthusiasm for our involvement with the Great Lakes. It's essential for the health of the region. We cannot expect intelligent involvement, behavior change, and solutions without a love of the lakes and a very, very solid understanding of the ecosystem and its problems. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Well, thank you, panelists. As I listened to the presentations, I jotted down all kinds of questions, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for a lot of questions. What we've decided to do for John and Carl, they've agreed to stick around for lunch, and if you have any questions specifically for them, they'll be available at lunchtime to talk to you. And if you have questions for Stephanie or Julie, we're going to entertain those now. So if you have cards or want to stand up, we'll be happy to listen to your questions. Meanwhile, like I said, I jotted down several myself. I have one for Julie. I know in our area, the health departments are responsible for monitoring beaches. And they do that based if they get a complaint, first of all, or given how much money they have, what their budget's about. And I was wondering if there's any thought given to a more systematic approach in terms of where to collect samples and how often to collect samples.
It's different. Like I said, in the application of the Beach Act, it's different among different Great Lakes states. In the EPA has a formula nationally how they divvy up the money that's allocated by coastal state, not just Great Lakes, but marine states. And so states are given amount of money based on population centers and length of coastline. And so some states like Michigan, they have a lot of coastline, I think are potentially shortchanged. They're looking at, as part of the reauthorization of the Beach Act, to reallocate money so that you could monitor more frequently. In Wisconsin, beaches are monitored in tiers, low, medium, or high priority, and so high priority beaches that are monitored a minimum of 4 times a week, medium or 2, and lower 1. And in Michigan, some beaches are monitored only once a week or less, once a month. So it partially is because of funding that you have no control over because of the allocation formula and the density of beaches. So if you have a lot of beaches in low population centers with the current allocation formula, I think you need to augment with local dollars if you wanted to expand your testing. So hopefully that will improve with the reauthorization of the Beach Act.
Well, I have another one for Julie, but I would like to ask Stephanie first. Stephanie, you mentioned your educational program, and I was wondering, as you were speaking about outcomes, what is your expectation, I guess, from your educational programs? I can think of new legislation, more recycling, greater water conservation, other things. Is there one thing or 2 things that you're looking at as far as outcomes from your education programs?
Just in a nutshell, I would say knowledge, connection, and stewardship. We really want people to understand the value of the resource. We want them to understand the problems that it faces, and we want them to be able to help solve those problems. So stewardship is actually one of the ultimate outcomes.
Okay, here's a question for Julie. Do you think the ongoing battles over the public's right of access to Lake Michigan beaches, i.e. above or at the seasonal high water mark, 1 foot in the water, 1 foot in the water, is the eroding residents' investment or caring? Who owns the lake? Property owners or people? If public access is perceived to be limited, how can we expect people to want to fund beach cleanups?
Well, it speaks to what Stephanie said with stewardship. I think that in a coastal community, people need to realize the Great Lakes as a tremendous gift and resource, and that having them clean, safe beaches speaks to all 3 legs of sustainability, to social justice, to improvement in our economy and protection of the environment, and having that link to your food source, your source of water. It is beholden on all levels of the municipality, of people, the homeowners, if they have lakefront property, and the citizens to all recognize that there's joint responsibility. It shouldn't be one or the other. It should be everybody's responsibility to care for and protect the Great Lakes. So it's to get that feeling of stewardship that, this isn't my problem, this is my property, my little bit of lakefront, and I should take care of it because I own it, versus property rights where you say, well, I can walk on this, small spot because you have to allow public access. It shouldn't be some sort of a conflict. It should be a joint feeling of stewardship that you would want to protect that.
Okay. I think we're going to have to end there. Again, thanks to the panelists.